We're ready when you are.
Hello, everyone. This is Ross Carpri again with Keller Williams Metro South, coming to you live to discuss a few issues today in the real estate industry. And of course, I have Andy Gagliano with me from Gagliano Mortgage. And today, one of the topics we're going to touch on is when I go to a house to list it and put it on the market, there are things that I have to do to establish what the price of the house is. Andy, on the other hand, from the lending standpoint, has to deal with information given to him from an actual real estate appraiser. And so today we're going to talk about that. There are two different appraisals. Two different ways to establish value. But he's going to talk about it from the appraisal standpoint, from an actual appraiser. I'm going to talk about how we come up and try to determine the price of a home. Now, usually when someone calls me and tells me they want to list their house, some of the things that I'll do will be to pull up information on their actual home, which includes how many bedrooms, how many baths, structure of the home, if it's brick, drive it, wood, if it sits on level land, if it's a corner lot, square footage, condition. There's a lot of things that play a part in how I determine the price of a home. I also look around and see what homes in that neighborhood, the information on what the recent sales were in that neighborhood. If it's a house that's comparable to the house I'm trying to list, and it's sold for X dollars, then I use that as part of my data. There's a lot of different data that we have to gather and then come up with an idea of what to list the house for. Now, those are not always the easiest because prices change. You have neighbors that might foreclose on their home. It's going to reduce the price of the actual neighborhood. There's a lot of factors that come into play that helps that is considered in trying to determine a person's value to put the house on the market for. Now, usually I'll have an idea of a range when I get to the home. And then, of course, as I view the home with the homeowner, try to determine condition. If the house is perfect, mint condition, totally remodeled, nothing to do for the buyer except move furniture in, then obviously that's going to be considered your mint condition price. If I go there and the house is just destroyed and it's cluttered up, bad windows, flooring is torn up, carpet's torn up, all those play a part. It's just like a car. If you have a mint condition car, you get more for it. But if you have one that's used, it has a lot of dents and has been wrecked and various things, that's going to affect the price as well. Well, that's the way it happens. That's what happens when we go. That's how we determine value when we actually go to someone's home and put it on the market. Now, we use a lot of different means of data that when we combine it all together, usually gets us pretty close to what the property appraises for or might appraise for. We won't know that, though, until we get into the sale process to where the lender gets involved and we go through the actual process of where they actually have to have the house appraised. Now, that I'll let Andy get into that, but getting back to the listing side, again, if I go to a house and the neighborhood prices range from 400 to 500,000, then of course that gives me a pretty good window, but I have to start comparing condition, square footage, different things that if the house is updated or outdated, that plays a part in it. And let's just say I come up with the figure of 450,000. Then that's what we put the house on the market for, and we get a contract. Say we're fortunate enough to get a contract at 450,000 at full price, then it has to go through the loan process. And then, that is determined by the lender. It's determined by the appraiser that he's going to get out there. And then that's where we have to make sure that we're very, very close as we can get without actually doing an actual appraisal. And one thing I'll note for sure, and then I'll turn it over to Andy, is appraisals don't last forever. I've had people tell me, yeah, we had the house appraised 5 years ago and appraised for 600,000. Well, that's great, but you didn't sell it then, so we can't go by that. We have to look at what today's market can bear and what today's market prices are for different properties. So that's kind of how we determine property value from the listing standpoint. And I'm going to turn it over to Andy now, and he can kind of give you an idea of what appraisers do that might be a little different than what we do. We use a lot of the same data, but sometimes appraisers have a little more detailed data, and I'll let Andy take that up with you now.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ross. And that really is, in my mind, the biggest difference. Now, there are different types of appraisals. And what I mean by that really is the purpose for the appraisal. Is it for an FHA loan? Is it for a VA loan? Is it for a USDA loan? Or is it for a conventional loan? And there's going to be different appraisals for each one of those loan types. And appraisers are going to be looking at different things for each one of those loan types. Where what I mean by that is the condition of the property has a lot more weight with an FHA, VA, or USDA appraisal than a conventional appraisal. And there's certain standards that property has to be brought up to that are judged by safety, structural integrity or soundness of the property. And those are the main driving factors for those USDA, VA, and FHA appraisals that are done. The approach that those three organizations take, or entities take, when it comes to appraisals and home buying is that most of their clients don't have a lot of extra cash. And so if they buy a property, if they buy a home that is going to need a lot of work to make it sound and to make it safe, then there's a really good chance that that buyer may not have the funds to do that, because typically those three loan programs allow a buyer to have a lower down payment and allow the seller to pay more closing cost than a conventional loan allows. And so buyers can get into those properties with less money out of pocket. And FHA, VA, and USDA want to make sure that the property is coming to the buyer in move-in condition. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the condition of the home has to be brand new. It can be lived in, it can be used, it doesn't have to be updated. It just has to be sound and secure. So with that being said, there's really not a whole lot of difference in how Ross would price a property and how an appraiser would value a property. Those are both opinions of value. With an appraiser, you've got someone who is in the business of valuing homes. That is their number one purpose for being, is to value someone's property. Whereas a realtor, they have to not only be able to value properties, but they have to be able to sell those, to market those properties. And so the real estate agent's really kind of taken on a multiple roles there. But for an appraiser, they have one role to take care of, and that is to value that property, to determine a value, to give their opinion of value of that property. They're going to look at the same things that Ross is going to look at as far as comparable properties in the neighborhood. Ideally, they would want to take your neighbor's house that looks exactly like yours, sits on the same lot, has the same amenities, same number of bedrooms, same number of bathrooms, and that property sold last week, they would love to use that as a comparable property to compare to your home, because those values are going to be almost identical. There's some market conditions that would have to be factored in there. You know, are home prices in the area rising, or are home prices in the area falling? And if so, then you've got to take those things into account as well. But generally, that would be what an appraiser would be looking for: a property that's as close in size, number of bedrooms, amenities, and location as your home is. And then the appraiser is going to make, and we know that doesn't exist. Okay, that even if your neighbor's home is identical to yours, chances are it didn't sell in the last month or in the last 12 months. And that's one stipulation appraisers have to do. They have to try to get a property that's sold within the last 12 months, and they have to try to get a property as close to your home as they can to use that as a comparable sale. And so one thing that Ross hit on is the amount of data that an appraiser has readily available to them compared to what a real estate agent has available to them. Such as, a lot of times an appraiser is going to have pictures of the interior of those comparable properties. All of those pictures are uploaded into a database. Ross, a lot of times when he's pricing a home, to determine the square footage of that house, he's got to look at county tax records. Well, county tax records are really not often correct. Whereas an appraiser went to that property next door that sold and measured it. Someone physically measured that property, so we know what the square footage is of that property. And so that it allows the appraiser to be able to find properties that are more comparable just because of having that extra detail available to them. And things like, well, this property has a fence and it sold for $200,000, and this one doesn't have a fence. Everything else is identical. It's probably going to cost $5,000-$6,000 to build a fence, but that fence that's at that house is older. It's not a brand new fence. And so maybe instead of this house that I'm valuing being worth $200,000 because everything else is identical, and the one next door to it has a fence, maybe we deduct $2,000 off the price of the house that I'm valuing. So now that home without the fence is $198,000. The home with the fence is $200,000. Things like that are going to be what an appraiser looks at to determine their opinion of value. And I've said this now multiple times, and I want to stress it. An appraisal is an appraiser's opinion of value, and that is extremely important.
All right.
Now, let's say Ross sells your home for $310,000 and the appraisal comes in at $305,000. Well, that can affect your mortgage qualifications, and it can affect your monthly payment. It can affect your down payment. It can affect your loan amount. So it's important that that appraisal comes in at least for the sales price. But you as a buyer have a right to dispute the appraiser's opinion of value. Now, in that dispute process, you have to be able to justify your dispute. You can't just say, well, my house is worth $310 because, well, I live in it. And I painted all the walls on the inside. They were all painted last year. You've got to be able to have something more to stand on with your argument than, I think my house is worth $310, not $305. And that's where Ross, having done his research, can come in and say, okay, well, here are the 4 comparables that I used. These 2 comparables were off-market sales and sold for cash, which means those buyers did not have to get an appraisal. So that means there is no data on those 2 homes.
Right.
The appraiser did not even know that those 2 homes sold. So in the dispute process, we give the appraiser those 2 addresses and say, hey, here are the details of the sale of those 2 properties. And you need to consider these in your evaluation for your opinion of value for the subject property. And so at that point in time, the appraiser is going to look at those 2 comparables and say, you know what, Ross, you're right. The house that I'm valuing is worth $310. Or maybe the appraiser says, no, it's not. That these 2 comparables that you gave me, I can't use. They're either too old or they're too far away or whatever. They're in much better condition or they're in much worse condition, whatever it happens to be. There's a reason why I can't use these 2 comparables. So I'm sticking with my value of 305. So it's important to know that just because an appraiser says a house is worth X, that does not mean that that is the gospel truth. There are ways to dispute that value. And so with all of that said, the appraisal is an integral part of the mortgage process. We do occasionally run up against some problems with appraisals where the value comes in lower than the sales price, and we try to dispute that valuation from the appraiser, and we're not successful. And at that point in time, Ross and the selling agent have to go back to the table and try to negotiate along with the seller and the buyer to negotiate a new price, or hey, is the buyer going to come out of pocket the difference in the value of the appraisal and the sales price? Is the buyer going to pay that in cash? So there's some ways to overcome that hurdle if it ever pops up in a transaction, and that's something that maybe we can talk about on a different video, just how
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. And so with all that said, Ross, I have a question for you. So let's say you come look at my house, and on our initial phone call before you come to look at my house, I say, Ross, I think my house is worth $325. My neighbors 2 doors down, their house sold for $310. And then I have a friend who lives in the neighborhood behind me. They sold their house for $315. It's very similar to mine, but mine's newer. You know, my home's nicer than theirs is. And so you come out, look at my home, you've done your homework, and you say to me, Andy, the numbers show that your house should be $315, not $325. At that point, you are trying to list that home for sale. What is your process at that stage? Does the buyer get to decide what the sales price is on that home? And if so, have you had situations where you and the buyer just totally disagree about what that house should be priced at?
Well, excuse me, I have had that in the past. And most of the time when that does happen, the information that I have and the information that the seller has are way further apart than $10,000. Okay. If it's, $5,000, $10,000, something like that, then I need to make sure that the sellers understand it's not my call. It's your call because it's your house. My job is just to make sure that when I sell the home and get an offer on the home, 2 things I look for, I try to make happen. Price it right to where a lot of people will go in and look at it. Can't get anybody to buy it if they don't look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And to make sure that once they make an offer, whatever that offer is, make sure it appraises. That's the two things I care about. Without either one of those, we can't make it happen. If people don't come in and look at the house, you can't sell it. If you got it priced too high and people come there and make an offer, say for full price, if it doesn't appraise, we got a problem. Because the things that I've seen happen, and this happened 2 or 3 years ago when we had the buying frenzy, when everybody was paying $50,000 over list, no inspection, no repair. They just wanted the house. Those are the people today that are going to be in a world of hurt when they go to sell their house. For one thing, they paid too much for it. I'm sure inflation has caught up with it a little bit. But when I'm $5,000 or $10,000 off from my seller, I'll usually try to show them what I have, let them show me how they can substantiate. And what I tell them too, you've got to take the personal aspect of it out of the equation.
Right.
Sure, this is your home and your kids grew up here. Your kids were born here. They were raised here with their cousins and neighbors. And you got a lot of personal things that to most people is really priceless. So you can't put a value on it. But to Joe, Jane, and John Doe that are looking at your house, they don't care about all that.
Yeah.
They don't care that your kids were born here. They just care that this house is good for them, fits their needs, where they can create their memories. But you can't get people to understand that because so many people are so they watch a lot of the shows with Chip and Joanna, and they watch a lot of these flip houses and all these things, and they just think they can do that. And some of them do. And that's what makes it hard, is because we try to tell them that's not real world. But when they see it happen, friend of theirs, my friend sold his house. He didn't even put a sign in the yard and got $40,000 more than he even thought. Hey, it happens. But I call that the luck of the draw, because that doesn't happen every day. But to get back to your question, if I'm $5,000 or $10,000 from what the seller's thinking, or even 20, I got to try to work it out with them to compromise. But it's their decision on what the house is put on the market for. Now, if they say, Ross, my house is worth $325 and I think it's worth $310, and we just can't come to an agreement, got one or two options. One, if it's too high, if they want $50,000 more than I think it's worth, it's not going to sell anyway.
Right.
In most cases. So I'm putting my name out in the front yard on a property that I know is not going to sell. And we call that an overpriced listing. You hear it all the time. But if I'm close, I'll tell them, look, I'm not going to argue with you about the value of your home. I'm just telling you what I'm finding in my data. If you want me to list the house at $325, I will do that. But I've got to have an agreement with you that and we let the market kind of dictate, okay? After a month, 3 weeks or a month, if there's no activity and nobody looking at your house, we're going to have to do something, because you want to move on to another home. You probably have a house you got in mind, or have a house cited that you want to buy. You're not going to be able to do that. And, got to make sure that there's a lot of things that go into that. So what I'll tell them, look, I'll do it, but after about 3 weeks, we'll reevaluate. If the house is being shown by a ton of people, say you've had 15, 20 showings, no offers, that's a signal. Okay. If your house has not been shown at all, that's a signal. You got to kind of let the market dictate, and then the market will tell you what you need to know. But if somebody really truly wants to buy your home, and they're one of the 20 people that look at it, then if they make an offer, then that tells me, one, they're serious, and you've got to get serious on what you're willing to sell it for. And you can't be hard-legged about wanting 325 or nothing, because basically what you're saying is, like most sellers do, I don't have to move, you know. But yeah, obviously, if you want to move, then there's a reason. You either want to buy another house, you want to get in another neighborhood, another school zone, whatever. So there's things that drive those decisions, but we have to kind of talk it out with the sellers and try to determine what's the most important thing. You don't want to lose a sale of a house for $5,000 or $2,000 or whatever.
Right.
But the seller makes the determination, to answer to your question.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And
That's
it's
good information.
difficult. And you know, on the flip side of that coin, I've seen people. I had one house. It was in Forest Park over by Highland Golf Course.
Yeah.
Lady told me, she said, Ross, she said, I want to ask, can't remember the number. I'm just going to make a number up. Houses over there are probably going for mid 200s. She said, I want to ask 350. Wow. I said, you serious? She said, yeah. She said, and then let me tell you the situation with this house. She had two Shelties, the little miniature collies or whatever. They had literally destroyed the wood, hardwood floors. You didn't know they were hardwood floors. That's how bad they were. It's like she put sandpaper on the bottom of the dog's feet, and they ran all through the house. The house was in disarray. It was old. It was something that I was like, wow. Anyway, long story short, I said, okay. I said, same thing. We're gonna reevaluate and see what happens. Put it on the market. Put coming soon, because she had some things she was trying to get out of there. And lo and behold, I had an agent call me. She said, Ross, she said, I got to have that house that you got for sale. She said, let me tell you my situation. I said, okay. She said, the father, it's a true story. The father of my child lives next door. He knows the house. He knows the lady. He doesn't care. He wants the house. He wants to pay cash for it, and we want to buy it sight unseen before it hits the market.
Wow.
So that blows that theory, you know, thinking that you get to do, because it was cash. It didn't matter what it appraised for. He wanted it. He wanted his son to be in his backyard.
Yeah.
He bought the house.
Yeah.
He was able to do it. So there's a lot of variables. There's no cut and dry. There's no standard rule of thumb. You got to try to go by your parameters, but there's an extreme case everywhere, and you just have to play it by ear and see what happens.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, and for me, being in the position that I'm in as a loan officer, I'm able to choose an appraiser pool, and I have a pool of appraisers, and my appraisal orders are assigned to one of those appraisers in my pool randomly. We don't get to pick the appraiser anymore. So it's all assigned randomly. But I'll tell you that the appraisers that I put into my pool over here to be assigned appraisal orders randomly is none of them, they've all been in the business for well over 20 years, probably closer to 30. But none of them will tell you that the value that I give a property is what that property is worth, because they know what the real world is like. They know that the real determining factor of what a property is worth is what a willing sellers will sell it for and what a willing buyer will pay for it.
And I've seen it happen every day, and it's all in depend. It doesn't matter if it's $10,000 or more than that. I mean, I've got a guy now across the street from him. There was a house, was not even for sale. This person went and knocked on the door and said, my wife wants this house.
Mhm.
Guy says it was not for sale. He said, what would it take to get you out of here? Do you know that that buyer paid, and this was in Greystone, that buyer paid $1 million more than he would have even thought about putting it on the market for. And the guy paid cash. So, there's door knockers every day. You have them.
Yeah.
You have them. I know a lot of them. So that shoots the whole theory about the appraisal, but that's just the industry. You have them. And if
Yeah.
they want it bad enough and the buyer wants it bad enough, you can't tell a couple whose wife has to have that home. There's a good chance they're going to get that home one way or another.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that kind of just shoots the whole appraisal thing. But the business is nothing like it was a couple years ago. But properties are selling. What I've noticed too is there are more properties over $1 million that are selling that I never thought I'd see.
Yeah.
You see a house $6-7 million, like, whoa, he'll sit on that listing a while. No, you give it 2-3 months, maybe 4-5 months, it's gone.
Yeah.
And that shocks me because you just don't know what, over time, I guess people have just accumulated wealth and they're able to do that. And it blows your mind because you just wouldn't think somebody would buy a $2-3 million house in less than, sell it less than 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you're right. I can think back just even right before COVID, if $1 million home went on the market, it sat on the market for a while.
sure,
Now there are so many $1 million homes on the market and they're selling every single day.
sure.
And so it's not unusual anymore
Mm-mm.
for a property to be above that $1 million mark. And somebody's willing to buy it and either pay cash or get, a mortgage for half or 3/4 of the amount of the sales price, and they move right on along. So
Well, it blows your mind. I mean, Homewood's that way. Of course, obviously Mountain Brook's that way. It's you just don't know what I normally do. I try not to think of that when I'm listing a home. Of course, a lot of it depends on where you are. But if you go there and you do your homework, and that figure you come up with, say, is 450,000, that's what you put it on the market for. Now, if somebody wants it bad enough, can pay more for it, they'll offer you more.
yeah,
But then that happens, but it's rare. But my main goal is to make sure that whatever I price it at, that it'll appraise when I get an offer on it.
yeah,
Now, the sad part of that, people have this thing in their mind, and I've seen it happen, which is probably why they have it in their mind, is they say, well, I know a lot of agents that price them low to sell fast. I don't like to do that. You're playing with somebody else's money, somebody else's hard-earned equity, and you're leaving it on the table. And I don't think that's right.
yeah,
Because I think people they're trusting me to give them the most I can give for the house. If I price it low and try to convince them that that's the price and it sells overnight, then that kind of tells me that they've been played. And I
yeah,
don't like to do that. So
yeah. And there are not many sellers out there that if they sell their home in a few hours of having it on the market for list price, there are not many of them that are going to, in 2 days, 7 days, 10 days, have the thought of, well, I should have asked for more money. It sold that quick. I should have asked for more money.
they do, though. They do. They blame it. I guess they have to make sure or justify pick me, for example. If I put it at 350 and it sells in 2 hours, first thing that's going to come to their mind, wow, I should have probably asked 375.
Absolutely.
But I gave you the data showing that 350 was the number. You know,
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to get people to understand. Everybody wants the most they can get. I get all that. But what they don't understand is buyers want to get the house for the cheapest amount.
That's right.
So you got two forces working against each other. And if somebody says, "Well, hey, I think 350 is fair. I'll pay you 350," and they sell it in 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever, immediately, I don't care who you are, immediately you're gonna think, "Oh man, I probably should have asked 375 or 400."
Yeah.
But that's not the number that we agreed to, and that they lose that real quick. So
yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah.
but there's all kinds, and we could talk about this for days, but to make sure everybody understands, we're dealing with we're dealing with the same thing from two different sources, and that's what makes it. I wouldn't say makes our job hard, but that's what we have to concentrate on, because the last thing we want to do is price it low. And the last thing an appraiser for a lender wants to do is appraise it high if it doesn't justify.
Right.
So you got two barriers there that's working against each other.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Well, good deal. Andy, thank you so much. I think it was a good session. And
Yeah.
folks, if anybody has any questions about anything, you're welcome to call me. I'm at 205-601-0123. That's my cell phone. You can call or text, and I'll let Andy tell you how you can get in touch with him and if you have any questions.
Yeah. So I can be reached at 205-979-4412. I'm at extension 1. And feel free to, that's my office number. So don't text that number, but feel free to give me a call and ask any questions that you might have. I'm happy to help out. And so, Ross, thank you for having me on again today, and hope your recovery is still going well and you're back up and running marathons again soon.
Thank you. Well, I don't know about the marathons, but I am doing better, and I'll go next week. And let's see, today's Wednesday, week from yesterday. Hopefully, get the cast taken off. So we'll see what happens.
That'll be great. You be able to drive yourself after that?
No, I think it's going to be a while after that. They're going to put me in a boot and kind of get me acclimated to getting pressure on it again.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing I'm probably a month, maybe a month and a half out of driving.
Okay.
But as long as I know it's coming, I can withstand that.
That's true. It seems like every day goes by faster than the one yesterday.
You are not kidding. You're telling the truth. So
yeah. Well, good luck to you with all that, and I'll see you next week.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys, and y'all have a good day.
All right.